Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here. My name is Becky Kekula, and I am the director of the Disability Equality Index at an organization called Disability In, where we support global corporations as they go on their journey to be more inclusive of people with disability across their enterprise. And I myself have a physical disability as a person with dwarfism. So this work is extremely near and dear to my heart. I struggled to enter the workforce after college. I ended up sending out 1,000 resumes, went on 100 interviews, and every time I walked in the door, I was judged based on my appearance. And I could tell the physical body gestures of discomfort that were right in front of me because of the Americans with Disabilities Act that was passed over 30 years ago. They weren't able to verbally say anything, but I could see that people were still uncomfortable. And they also weren't willing to give me the constructive feedback I needed to learn and grow. It's very possible every one of those interviews, I could have just been bad at interviewing, but nobody ever told me that. So then I assumed that it was because of my physical disability that I did not get the job. And it's clear that my job applications got me those 100 interviews. So I was qualified to do the job. It was more of the external doubt of them thinking that I couldn't do the job. And really, what I've done now is given back to the community to help prevent that from happening to more people in the future.
Thank you, Becky, for sharing that and the pain as well, to make it very honest. And so appreciate you being where you are, today, now, not only, going through the journey, but helping others not going through so much more pain in the future. We'd love, actually, before I dive into some of the questions, because, I get to have the pleasure of actually learning a little bit about disability and having been part of Supplier Diversity Network. Tell me a little bit more. Why is disability in as a work, and what it means to be important in just corporation inclusion in the workplace? And also tell me a little bit more of the particular project you are leading called Disability Equality Index. What is it? Why does that matter? Why should more people pay attention to this?
Absolutely. So Disability In was really founded on the pillar of supporting business on their journey when it comes to disability inclusion. We are a nonprofit organization, and a lot of times people think disability nonprofit, they immediately think advocacy or activist out on the streets advocating for different issues that are related to the disability community. I would say we may put our foot forward when there's something that could be related to jobs of people with disabilities, but we really try to stay neutral and support business on their journey as they're trying to navigate this space that they just haven't been a part of historically. They may think of diversity as gender, people of color, LGBT starting to be more prominent, but disability always falls off the agenda unless we intentionally remind them to include it. And there's intersectionality. A lot of people from all different backgrounds also have disabilities. So what we try to do is we educate. We do a lot of disability etiquette training to help people understand the different terminology. I always tell people, just call me by my name, and then we can get to know each other, and you'll realize that you really don't have to make many alterations to our conversation. But there's such a broad range of disability. The Americans with Disabilities Act that I previously mentioned identifies disability as a physical or mental impairment that limits one or more of life's major activities. And that is something that a lot of people don't realize they fit into. 75% of disabilities are non-apparent, and 25%, which includes myself, are those that you can see and are apparent. And we really try to be as broad as possible when we reference disability. We did change our name in July 2018 from United States Business Leadership Network to Disability In, because we are working hard to strengthen the word disability. You'll see a lot of companies, they have employee resource groups that focus on their employees with disabilities, and they use every word but disability, but they're still saying that they address disability in those group conversations. We really want to just strengthen the word and keep the definition as broad as possible so nobody's left behind. It's a category that anyone could fit into at any point in their life. So we have an annual conference that happens every summer. where companies come together, share best practices. One of the greatest things about this organization is we bring together companies who are direct competitors, and they're able to share best practices because no company alone can solve the unemployment rate discrepancy for people with disabilities that's twice that of those without. And because of COVID, it's gotten even worse. What we need to do is continue to have everyone come together, understanding that they can't do the work alone. We work with over 260 global corporations. A lot of them fit within the Fortune 1000. And there are people who sit in different seats within an organization who we work with. It could be the diversity department, could be supplier diversity, could be HR, could be the CEO's office. It really depends on who is really passionate about driving this work forward within an organization, with the hopes that there's a trickle effect that more people get involved. So we have our conference every year, but we have programming 365 days a year where we're supporting our companies. We work with companies to have them present on webinars about different disability topics. We have a Next Gen Leader program, which is geared towards students in STEM, finance, or business who can identify as having a disability, apply to the program, get mentored by our corporate partners who sit in corporations, and then some of them even get hired at our conference after the 6-month mentorship program. A lot of them get hired for either internship or job opportunities. Our supplier diversity program, which is a huge piece, and I know it's something you're very interested in. We are the certifying body for service disabled veteran-owned businesses, disability-owned businesses, and veteran disabled-owned businesses. And it's a 2-year certification. People who have companies that are 51% owned and operated by someone with a disability can get certified. And it's another wonderful avenue for employment for people with disabilities. And most likely those people are hiring more people with disabilities to work with them at their certified business. And then those certified businesses have access to the corporations as potential vendors in the future. And then the Disability Equality Index, which is a program I run. It is a benchmarking tool that allows companies to self-assess how they're doing with disability inclusion across the enterprise. It has 6 categories. It starts with culture, making sure that disability is included in the diversity statement right up front. Intentionally use the word disability or the community continues to feel left behind. We ask about employee resource groups related to disability. We ask about hiring goals related to disability. We see if you have a diversity and inclusion report where you disclose how many people identify as having a disability. And then we go into leadership where we talk about what are people doing within 2 levels of the CEO. Are there allies at the senior executive level? Are there people who identify as having a disability at the senior executive level? Because it really starts with that executive leadership and trickling down to talent acquisition to allow them to feel more comfortable about hiring people with disabilities. Then we go into accessibility, building accessibility, website accessibility. Are you thinking about those things, especially when it comes to fire drills? Are you thinking about including people with disabilities in your plans? Websites, are you doing accessibility checks for your internal facing and external facing websites? Some companies who are heavy on customer facing experiences may focus so much on the external where they forget to think about the internal sites, and that prevents someone from being able to work there, someone who may use a screen reader technology. And then we go into employment practices with 4 different pillars: benefits that are helpful to the disability community to have them feel supported on the job and at home. Then we get into recruitment. Are employers putting it out there that they're willing to make an accommodation from the job application process to the interview to onboarded to promotion? And then we go into employment, education, retention, and advancement, where we talk about making sure people with disabilities are included in the retention and advancement plans, and that they're supported if they want to move up and learn and grow at an organization. They could be part of a retention and advancement program that may be specific to one demographic, but you just want to say that maybe women with disabilities can apply to the women's leadership program. We don't really want it to be siloed anyways, because we want them to feel empowered to be a part of all the other initiatives that exist. And then accommodations. A lot of companies find it valuable to have an accommodations fund, which allows them to access money to accommodate employees who have requests. And we often talk about accommodation requests as productivity tools. it allows them to be successful in the job. And it's not necessarily something that they want that's outrageously expensive. And even with the ADA, it's reasonable accommodation that helps someone feel successful. And then we go into community engagement, making sure people are being educated about the disability community as a whole. So as a company, the culture can be more inclusive, and thinking about making social media postings accessible, putting descriptions to photos, and adding captioning to videos, including disability representation in marketing materials so people can see themselves represented. And then the last piece, the supplier diversity piece, is the last weighted piece, which means it counts towards a company's score. And we encourage corporations to engage with disability-owned businesses across their supply chain. And lastly, we have a category where we're just collecting best practice information, but there will be more work going forward globally. And we are asking if companies have employee resource groups outside the US and non-discrimination policies that apply to employees outside the US that protect people with disabilities and all of the other demographics. And in each of the categories, we also allow companies to share best practices because we want companies to be able to learn from each other. And then all of these questions are publicly available on the DEI website, which is disabilityequalityindex.org. So even though I kind of did a high level quick run through, it's about a 50-page document with a lot of questions. Anyone can use it. Right now, we're finishing our 2021 DEI period, and we'll announce our top scoring companies this summer at our conference, and then we'll start getting ready for the 2022. And it measures the previous calendar year.
That's a lot of things that you are keeping track of, and we are so appreciate that you walk us through verbally, just at least for those who might be learning about this for the first time and realizing that if you are already doing it, these are ways that you can refer to and continue to do even better. And for those who haven't thought of it, hey, these are some tangible ways that they can start. And so, Becky, thank you for all that you do personally and, as individual, but also, you together as a team do in the organization.
Absolutely.
Taking a little step back. So I think one of the things that I love that you've highlighted is just how much work has already been done and is continuing to being done. I'm curious, because of that, what would you say from the macro lens, whether it's tech development or any kind of workplace inclusion, especially from your lens, because that's a lens that you study and think a lot about, that you feel in general, companies or at least or organizations are heading at least a better direction than where it was hopefully a few years ago, and areas that you still feel is lacking despite maybe good intention or maybe just being oblivious. So tell me those two lenses. Where in general in the workplace are people doing a better job, and areas that we got to make sure we get better at this? What comes to mind for you?
I think the recruitment piece, the companies are getting better at being open to hiring people with disabilities. The retention and advancement piece is something that still needs a lot of work. They're not necessarily thinking of people with disabilities in leadership roles. And it's important to give people the tools they need to feel successful so they can grow if they want to move up within an organization. We're often celebrating the new hires and how many new hires with disabilities there are, but are we really celebrating or talking about people with disabilities at executive levels? And then I would just say another thing lacking, not enough companies are thinking about the benefits of having a supplier diversity program and engaging with disability-owned businesses. And you hear so many great stories from people who started their own business because they were facing so many barriers to the traditional employment track. And they just thought, I'm going to find something I'm passionate about and I'm going to create a business and I'm going to network as hard as possible. And it really is something that companies should pay more and more attention to. Or maybe they have a supplier diversity program and they just haven't thought yet about including disability. And then enterprise-wide access, which is that category where we talk about building and website accessibility. It's something that not enough people are thinking about, and it is a barrier to entry for people who utilize the tools that need to be accessible.
And to build out that excuse, both mine and let's say the audience is ignorance, could you give some examples of, let's say, we've tried, Becky, tell us like what are examples where we accidentally made it exclusive? Like tell us how internal programs and softwares, how, we could do a better job. If you can share some stories and examples of how, hey, FYI, here are examples where it can be more inclusive and this is why it's not as inclusive.
Well, I think companies may work really hard to have their internal products and services be accessible, but they forget if they use a vendor for something like payroll and time cards and all these other things, is that vendor also thinking about accessibility the same way? And it even trickles over to benefits when you're signing up for different benefit programs. Are those documents accessible? Are your employees going to be able to access them? So I think sometimes people think a quick fix is hire an external service to come in and fix things, but you need to make sure that that external service is also practicing the same commitment to accessibility.
What's a good way that we can check it?
Ask it, put it in your vendor contracts that the tools must be accessible in order for us to consider purchasing them.
What are other ways that you envision how technology is both an opportunity and where you hope that it could be even better?
I think technology has definitely allowed us all to stay afloat over the past year and a half during the COVID pandemic, and it will allow people who choose to continue to work remotely be able to do so. And I want us to also think about those people who do feel isolated and want to get back to the office physically. We need to equally think about building access and physical access just as much as we're thinking about technology access.
Tell me an example. Let's say you have the magic wand, like you can create anything and everything that you would like. And creating this particular product that is tech driven would make your life and other friends of disability be better, especially in regards to the workplace. What would it mean and what would that look like? And what would it help you do?
I think the thing for me is if I could have like a directory of who's in a company who has either a disability or is an ally of someone with a disability, the conversation and dialogue for whether it's for recruitment or networking or just overall development relationships, those people just have a different perspective and they're willing to connect and have their guard down so much faster than those who may be trying to run away from something and they are fearful of disability. So if we could just pinpoint those people who we know will be allies, and we don't have to have those uncomfortable conversations where I walk into a room and people are shaking, where I know that I'm going to feel welcome when I walk into the room. And I don't know if it's kind of a tie-in with technology and social etiquette, but making sure everyone has the tools they need to not be fearful and accept everyone for who they are, which allows everyone to bring even more of their whole selves to the environment.
What's one thing that you would say that absolutely has to change in addition to that in the workplace?
I think just the doubts of what people are capable of and the fear of offering constructive feedback. I had a great boss a few roles back, and we came up with this strategy where we would talk about the mistake that maybe happened that day, and then we would talk about how we plan to not make that mistake in the future. So he had a great way of coming to talk to me and saying, okay, this happened. Like, what do we think went wrong? But it wasn't a bash of me. It was more of the situation. There was something that needs to be fixed, especially as we figure out how to address something like this in the future. And then we would immediately talk about in the future, let's do it this way. So you don't necessarily feel like, oh, it's all your fault. It's going to sit on your shoulders and you're just going to be regretful this whole time. It's let's just talk about how we're going to do better in the future because we can't fix what we just did in the past. And I think there are strategies like approaching someone and asking, can I offer you some feedback? And then allow them to decide if they need the feedback. But if they don't accept the feedback, that could prevent them from learning and growing too, because that may be a point in time where they need the feedback. And I think it's also important to talk about, yes, we want more people with disabilities in jobs, but we want the playing field to be level. So at the process of interviewing, we all have to be truthful to ourselves too. Can we really do what's being asked of in the job? Or are we passionate about what's being asked about in the job? Because if we just show up at work and get a job to get a job, you're going to lose us. We're going to lose interest real fast. So you want to make sure you're passionate about the company, the organization, the mission, and the role that you're applying for so you can give it your all, because the reality is we're always going to have to try 100 times harder than the person next to us. So we got to be enjoying doing it.
Which brings also to the lens, since you get to work with a lot of business owners who happen to have a person with disability, you said 51%, more than that, to be a certified business, part of disability. And tell me a little bit more, what are some things that you find, working with these businesses to be of joy, as well as what you hope they can keep in mind for those who have not realized why being part of a disability and member could be a benefit to them too?
I think one of the biggest things, even for the businesses, is to make yourself available, like especially when it comes to technology. Have a good website, make it easy for people to find you so they have no excuse to say, oh, we didn't know disability owned businesses existed. Put your information out there. I found this, I worked for a while behind the scenes in the entertainment industry, and there are a lot of people that I would consider well-known actors with disabilities. And maybe it's just because I work in the space, but I respect and admire them. But I go and look for them online and I can find very little information. And that's the way that sometimes talent gets hired. So it's really important to have a strong social media presence, website, have everything buttoned up in a package. It's worth the investment so people can find you. And use your certification logo wherever you can so people know that you're a trusted business.
Thank you very much for sharing that. On the macro lens, as you have highlighted, and why I was so excited to have you was just like having the diverse voices that we will bring together for the Liberate conference and the ideation sessions. I'm curious, especially thinking about all the different lenses that you sit and view the importance of why we need to make the workplace and life more accessible. What's something that you hope the folks who participate, including yourself through these video contribution, walk away with? Like, what do you hope that we walk away from Liberate, and why is that important?
I would just say don't feel overwhelmed. Do what you can. Try to digest the content that you're interested in, and you can probably go back and watch more later. Don't worry about mistakes you've made in the past. The purpose of events like this are to help you get better in the future. And I think too many people dwell on mistakes they've made in the past, and it prevents them from doing great work going forward. And just know that we're not all perfect, and we all just want to be given a chance to participate in a meaningful way in society. And it's also a time for you to kind of get to know yourself and what it is you want to focus on going forward. Even if you may not identify as having a disability or part of the diversity community or conversation, we need just as many allies. And you never know if a story that you hear is going to touch you in a positive way, where it encourages you to share a piece of your story, because your story matters.
Any other final thoughts you want to share?
Just have fun, enjoy, and just know that we're all in this together. I think we've learned that more than ever over the past year and a half, and we just need to keep moving forward and figure out how to be more inclusive. Ask questions, don't make assumptions, and check in with yourself and make sure you're being true to yourself. Stand up for others if you feel that others are not being treated properly. Put yourself out there and be willing to be an ally, because we need it more than ever.
With that, I thank you so much, Becky. I hope this was a meaningful time for you to get a chance to share. I just want to thank you again on behalf of the team, taking the time to be here. And I look forward to seeing you
Thank
and
you.
online. Thank you.